Calvin T. Mann, leading Emmy, served over 20,000 youth through speaking, coaching, and mentoring. He has inspired us for years. Welcome to Emmy TV Podcast with your host, Calvin T. Mann, the Encourager.
Welcome to Monday. Today is the 22nd. Time is flying. Today's conversation, we're going to keep it deep. It's part 2 of the disorder that causes the disruptions. And last week, as we covered, we talked about a number of things, but the one thing we left, that the African American culture, this is the one thing that we left that would be a solution, is they have to value their males. That was the first thing I wanted to put out. Dave, I'm glad you're in the building. Heather, once again, glad you're in the building. And we're back with the original Sugarty Boogity Boo. L Bug is in the building. And I say this because, Dave just came in the door, with some of the things that we do. We really don't like to have these conversations. We like to pretend. We like to watch other people. We like to ignore. But that topic last week about the disorders was heavy. This week, we're going to jump right back in. You and I were having this discussion about what are the, some of the things that impacts, right, that needs to be corrected. We were having that conversation, and I want to pick up. I want to welcome Dave, so I'm going to let you lead with this one, and we welcome Dave back in the building again, and say hello, Ms. Heather, before we get started.
Good day, good people. I'm excited to be here and really continue this really, really important conversation. When we talk about the disorder that is really the cause of disruptions, I wanted to make sure that I go back and define some of the terms that we were using. And I'm going to add another one today, just some information that came up in my research. So I'm going to start off with that one, and I'm going to go back.
Okay. And
I'm going to define the others. So in my research and in my study, I came across this theory by Karen D. Horney, and it's called neurotic trends. And so it's defined as the attitudes towards life that provide a feeling of safety and security under times of confusion and distress. But it's actually a false sense of security and a false sense of safety. And I think when we start having this conversation, I think you're going to see that be illuminated in some of the things that we're going to talk about today. Again, I'm going to repeat it one more time. It's the attitude toward life that provides a feeling of safety and security under times of confusion and distress, but it's actually a false sense of safety and security that we get. And so I'm going to go back now and define some of the terms that we were using on our last discussion that I know are going to come up again today. So the definition that we're going to use of disorder is a state of confusion. And we're going to sum it up and use it that way. And we're going to expand on those, of course. The next one is disruption. And disruption is defined as a disturbance or problem which interrupts an event, an activity, or a process. And so the process that we're talking about now is the process of family, the process of community, the process of living. And so disruption and how that interrupts the family. And then finally, we're going to define family as a group of one or more parents and their children living together as a unit. So that's intentional. So again, that's a group of one or more parents and their children living together as a unit. So, and then the final one that you'll hear us talk about probably from now on, we've been talking about it, but it's called acceptable culture. And so this is kind of a mindset that Calvin and I have been talking about, and trying to come up with a way to understand it. And so what we came up with was a term called acceptable culture. And for us, it was about the norms and what is considered normal behaviors, and that's in air quotes, established at home and accepted. But that also is carried over to the areas of where we work, we play, we worship, we shop, we learn, and we gather together. So that is what happens in your household, the ideas that you grew up with. Then you take those same ideas to school, or you take those same ideas outside in your neighborhood, and it becomes your norm. And as you continue to keep that mindset, and you continue to follow that path of behaviors, or what is normal behavior for you, it starts to expand, and either people accept that this is your behavior and mindset, they can start to repeat the same mindset and behavior, but ultimately the environment that you're in is accepted of, they're acceptive of the behavior, and then it becomes the norm. And so I think in our communities we see a lot of that by just dumping trash. So if you've been, driving down the street and you see somebody just throw an entire bag of garbage out of the window, food out of the window, I mean, it's a shock to me to actually see that, just to see that behavior, that you don't even care enough to take it to the next destination. You're just going to throw it out in the middle of the street. And that person's mind, that's an acceptable part of their culture. It's acceptable to do that. It's acceptable behavior. That's normal to you, and that's okay. It's not okay for me. I'll speak for myself. That's not okay for me. And so these are some of the disruptors that we're going to get into today.
Well, Dave, if you want to add, you can. I most definitely, the one thing that I want to really make clear is we have already seen change. So as we're having this conversation, it is clear we know what change looks like. We executed change, redirected some lives. So, but we did it with order, and really didn't realize in the work, boys, men, husbands, and fathers, right? So come across a study the other day about it's in the numbers, right? And it's all about males, right? And what's amazing is when I was saying to Heather, and she said, males, you're both the solution and the problem, right? But what is the makeup? Right? How did we get here? Right? What was the makeup? And so, the process for me was seeing the numbers and knowing in my heart that I was correct. Right? That I wasn't just seeing the numbers when it come to boys, just on black boys, right? I saw the marginalization, the word that we shouldn't use, the downtrodden, the position of males across the board. The issue in that process, right, which comes back to acceptable culture. We have acceptable culture in racism. We have acceptable culture in the use of the N-word. We have acceptable culture in suicide. As you just came in and saw that it was okay for generations, right, of suicide being in a family, right? We have acceptable culture in how we treat one another. We have acceptable culture when the father wants to be in his kid's life but don't want to be with you. We have acceptable culture when men walk away, right, and don't want to be a father to their children. We have acceptable culture in a number of areas. But what is amazing is the acceptance of the problem and the ignorance to the solution. That is what blows me away, right? It's, just simple construct. It appears as if we love they, but lack the love for we, so we can't conceive doing anything, right, when it comes to we, unless they may permit it. For me, as for mine, I am the we. We don't participate in they, but the they that hinders we looks like me more than the they that we see, right? Because in the work, we're here, Dave, Heather, Book, the work, just from the perspective of work. I said today to some parents who came in filling out the application, I don't have to do another thing. Dave, we don't have to do this. We don't have to do this at all. We will get up, walk, go on with our lives. We got kids, we got life, the whole nine. God purposed us to make difference. And so here we are, making a difference against everything. I was at a meeting yesterday and the guy said, man, your content on EMIY is powerful, but you have very little views. I said, that's because it's solutions. If every one of those channels was about a problem or a situation, or especially something on racism, right? If I put that up, right? Oh man, we'd have a banking channel. Go over there. They'll share it, right? Because of the acceptable culture, which is what she was saying. But I'm going to get into my solution later on. But Dave, would you like that?
I think you said some profound things. Knowledge expels the ignorance of knowledge. Knowledge expels the ignorance of darkness. And what we sometimes see is that we've been walking blindly for a long time. And this has basically been subliminally designed to condition us to think a certain thing is acceptable in our culture. Unfortunately, we don't take the time to do our due diligence. Both of you kept saying you do your research. That varies from, academia to social media to finding information that will get you to the dark place. Unfortunately, that acceptable culture has come comfortable with being in the darkness. Mm-hmm. So until we decide that we want to experience a light, then we're going to continue to walk this way. And it's sad because, again, it just continues right from generation to generation. And we understand, as you talk about the we, I'll just say the Caucasian, not every Caucasian, but the Caucasian persuasion, pretty much those who I would call the alpha males, who are able to dominate and control and set up laws and different standards that our society said was acceptable. Some of you have their face on the dollar. And yet, at the same time, they create these illusions that they're helping us, but at the same time, they're only benefiting themselves. It's up to us to do our due diligence. Like when we had Black Wall Street, men and women decided that they wanted to be entrepreneurs and move out of that mindset of slave mentality. Yet, unfortunately, I used to always say that, I don't need to worry about you running because I've taken the shackles off your legs and put it on your mind. And if I condition your mind to think a certain way, you're going to behave a certain way. And that's what we see. So when you saw that we take trash and we throw it out in our community, and you go to another community that's been around 100 years, and at today they don't have that. Their houses are 100 years old. It's not dilapidated, destroyed. They have a different mindset. It's not about how much money you make, it's how much you value what you make. And that's the same as what you value within yourself. So if you're a person that devalue yourself, you're going to display that outwardly. What's in a person comes out of a person. You cannot see a person who value themselves to take and throw trash in their own community. You can't see a person that value themselves and to make their homes dilapidated. You can't see a person that not value themselves and turn around there and shoot drugs in their arm. You're not going to see a person that value themselves turn around and hang themselves. because they have a different mindset. So that's when the Bible tells us, be not conformed to this world. We became conformed to a certain mindset that makes it a acceptable culture among ourselves. And until you get those people who are willing to fight, and here's the problem with most cases that I see, we have lost our warriors. We don't necessarily have to have a Pacific leader, but we need somebody who's willing to die for the cause. Once Martin Luther King, those group of people transition to God, and that's by design how they got there. At the end of the day, you lost those people who were willing to die. So you see a lot of causes come up, but when those causes come up, they're not willing to see it to the end. Martin said we need to see this to the end. And in most cases, you don't have the diehards. You have people who I call wave riders. They ride the surface of life. They don't want to go deep and get into no pearls, because that means you got to do some work. You got to change that original construct that's called acceptable cultures. You have to change that construct. And if you're not willing to change that construct, you continue to ride the waves. I'm good. Like Harriet Tubman said to the people in the movie, oh, you conditioned now. You got your nice wife. You got your nice home. But there's still people enslaved. I got to go back. See, we don't have the people willing to go back. So you're going to always see the trash thrown out, because at the end of the day, it's all inside of that person. The trash comes out because trash is in. You have to change the mindset and the spirit of the human being. And in this case, it will be as an African-American culture, we got to get back to the mindset of not being consumers of life, which means not just material things, but consumer of the negativity, consumer of the entertainment, to start looking at being people who are producer in life.
So I love that. I love that, right? But I'm going to redirect, right? Because what you said is right. Is no question. But right now, where we are, who we talking about, what we do that was my point. But you and I, we locked in. Heather, we're locked in to make a difference. One of the things that I say about that whole historical point was that there were thousands of other leaders behind them, because they could have never got to where they were at, right? But when you saw that, what happens was that deterred them. When they saw what happened to them, right, that deterred them. The next wave that came behind came in, with the self-destruction, right? And then the wave that's coming now is we not buying it. I was born in 65, so I was in the middle of it, right? So for me, I'm not buying it. I am not afraid, right? For me, because I see, again, how it is. We're watching it. We are literally talking about, just because we talk about males, we watch the system. The system is good at practicing on a culture and then putting it on all people. That's what the system does. So the system practice crack. Behind that, here comes all those other things. The system practice opioids over here. Behind that come all these commercials on pills and everything else, right? But what the system failed to realize, because they put the male into a demographic, what they fail to realize and what they are seeking, other countries have taken what they put down and shifted their entire mindset, growth, family, because they know, whereas the haters in the system bought into death, other countries and cultures bought into family. So whereas America right now is beneath the level on education, but by design, this is why you see these people right now with the hate, and right, because they've been convinced, the majority has been convinced that they're a minority, and they took that to use that for the greed. And so now you have a deception, a disruption, and disorder being rebreeded all over again, which is going to cost the culture. Now you then turn around and say this is what God wants, which means you are offering your whole mindset on this Christianity, the whole nine. The repercussions of God comes into play. Now, everybody ain't got to agree. Everybody ain't got to believe, right? But the acceptable culture of hate has already been reaping within the culture. So now you're going to create some more reaping within their culture. Your job is to stop the reaping within your culture, to lead your families. We don't have time to participate in those things. So back to what you were saying, there were hundreds of leaders. We didn't have the pictures on them. Just like right now, as we talked about before, if she don't do what she do, you don't do what you do, I don't do what I do, that's a gap in the system for the children, for families, for boys who they already have disinvested in from culture, system, women, children. We've already divested in the male culture. We then made him appear as he's the only monster. You see? So in he's being the only monster, he buys into being what? A monster. Because you put me on the news, you put me on everything, you tell me I'm not valuable, you give me violence, you give me everything I need to be the actual problem. The problem then becomes you can't get up, because if I'm the problem, I have the ability to destroy it all, because that's what makes up me. So I could be domestic violence, I could be a rapist, I could be a murderer. They got a place for us, of course, but then that seed, which is corrupted, becomes planted, and then it multiplies. We're looking at the multiplication, and the only way for us to fix and do and process that is that we, the leaders, raise the bar. One of the greatest things you're doing is becoming a doctor. Why? Every day I think about you becoming a doctor. Right? It's in my head every day. Dave about to be a doctor. Dave gonna be a doctor. Right? When I'm talking, yeah, we about to have a mentor that is a doctor on, right? So what does that do for me? Right? What does that do for me? It motivates me. Doesn't cause me to hate. It doesn't cause me to dislike. It motivates me. The issue is that those that go before us, they'd have doctorates and things like that, and then they frown upon you. Look at you. We call our babies, and I said this yesterday, just think about what we are doing to each other. Besides the N-word, we call our babies crack babies. We automatically narrate on their life that they're no good. Right? Within acceptable culture, we have this conversation, and you can stop me in a minute. Within this acceptable culture, right, we use abortion as a contraceptive and blame her. Wow. Why you didn't have the birth control? Oh, well, you ain't got to do it. I got $225. I got $300 on it to pay for you. Not, go on. Let's go on and get that. They take the abortion off the table, right? We yelling and screaming right now, but they took abortion off the table, right? So, you being young, right? What is it teaching you? Why do we have to have this? Accountability, right? Because I'm not accountable. I see this girl, I want to be with her, right? And then I get with her, I'm raw, she gets pregnant, I'm talking to her about birth control day after. You got to reap that. We don't like the reaping of the actions that we have taken, and that acceptable culture is what has to be changed.
Indeed. Well, I'm sitting in between these powerful men with these strong ideas and values, and that is part of our solution. That's part of what we need. We need to have male voices being expressed, and the second part of that is the action for correction. If we are doing more talking than action and correction, then we're spinning our wheels and we're wasting time. So I want to just put this challenge out as we're talking about this. There is a term called interrupters, and it's one that we're going to see a lot more this year and for the years to come. There are specific people and organizations that are set in place to become interrupters. What that means is that they are going person to person. That means that they're going house to house. That means that they're going family to family. They're going community to community to bring whatever that dialogue and the action steps behind it to change that dynamic. I think that each one of us has an opportunity to be an interrupter. And we should be doing that. And some of us do it, and most of us do it in some way. We just have to add not just prevention, not just intervention, but we also have to add intention. Without intention, your prevention and your intervention is just not enough. Because you have to, when you're intentional, your intention is to see something all the way to the end. We don't have enough people with intention. And so my challenge is that we do 3 things. 1, that we examine our own acceptable culture, and we examine that in the lens or from the lens of being an interrupter, being a prevention specialist, an intervention specialist, and an intention specialist. We have to shift, and everybody has it within their power because it begins with you. If you are shifting, if you decide to do something and see it all the way through to the end, even if it's just your own education, see it all the way through to the end. Don't stop when it gets hard. Don't stop when the resources run out. Continue. One of the, I think, the most amazing resources that we have now that we didn't have before are the free college classes. And in those classes, it's more than just you would think it's academic. You can learn how to do anything you want to. And I'm not talking YouTube. I'm talking about colleges that specialize, people that specialize in a particular thing and now have the ability to teach you to do it. If you sign up there are a couple of them. Coursera.org is one. edX is another one. You can go in there. If you want to learn a new language, you can put it in the search and you can find the free classes that you can take to learn a new language. If you want to find out how to communicate with your neighbor, if you want to find out how to communicate with your child, you can put that in the search engine and it will give you classes, their start date, how long that class is, what time of day, if it's what platform it's going to be on. And you can sign up for it. I think that was one of the most amazing resources that was dropped in our community, in our society, period, but that was dropped, that we can change. And this is one of Calvin's quotes: time is all we have is to change who we are. Time is all we have to change who we are. And so now that you have the time, you also have to make the change. Because if you don't like what you see when you walk out the door, when you go to work, when you go to the market, when you go to the gas pump, then you need to be a part of the solution. What can you do? What can you bring? What can you add? Now, what can you invent? What can you invent that now can replace the fuel that we have? So the fuel deficits that we have, it doesn't have to be as it always has been. There are opportunities for it to be different. And there are people who have been born into this world specifically for that one thing that you bring. Bring it. There are no excuses. Bring it. Whatever it is that you've been purposed in your life to do, the experiences that guide you in one direction or another, that's your journey. That's what you bring to our world. That's part of the change. If you're sitting on your resources, if you're sitting on your gifts, your talent, and your ability, you're passive and you're not a part of this process. So we need for you to get on board. It's not just Calvin. It's not just Dave. It's not just El Boog. It is all of us. When each of us take that next step, we can see the change. It's a massive ripple effect. We can see the difference that we can make when one person stands up and brings their gift to the table.
David?
Excellent. I think you said something that's very profound, and it's a key word, intention. When you're intentional, that means you move from being a wonder generality to a meaningful specific. What does that mean? That means that now you are targeting the end. One of the things that I used to teach was weaponry. And in the process of teaching that, you needed to be able to zero in on your target. Well, if you don't have a target in front of you, you don't have anything to shoot at. So you need a target. You need something before you. But one of the things that Calvin often mentioned about my PhD, and then she talked about staying to the end. I've been working on this PhD for 7 years, and I do it part-time. 7 years. 7 years is a long time to be in school. And I'm not just working on that. I'm working on the second master's simultaneously. Most people quit working just to do the PhD or sometimes the master's. And then I'm involved in all these different programs.
Yes.
So I wake up with intention. I am driven. I'm an overachiever. That's just the way it is. But I wake up with intention, and I still remember telling my father that the world was bigger than my neighborhood, and the world was bigger, and I need to go see it. But in the process of that, I became intentional to meet people who were intentional. Like minds do like things. So if I hang around people that want to throw garbage out the car, then probably I'm going to do the same thing. If I hang around people that want to get a fifth every day, I'm probably going to do the same thing. So I made sure I exposed myself. This is the advantage of 37 years in the military. I've been from one continent to another. And one thing that I've seen, the scenery change, the culture may change, the clothing may change, but the problems of life are the same. Everybody's dealing with the same thing. They want the same thing. They want family. They want resources. They want to have an opportunity to expand their abilities and talents. But when you're limited, now, here's the limitation. When you're limited from the inside out, I don't care what you expose people to. All these resources you brought to the forefront are beautiful. But if they don't feel within themselves they have the value to believe they can take, and every human being is given a talent and a gift. Nobody comes in this world without something. I've worked in mental health institutions where you have people play like, paint like Picasso. I mean, they can, play music. They can do all kind of things, but they didn't believe in themselves. They had the gift. They had their gift. I mean, you think about people like John Coltrane and all these different people had gifts, yet they were shooting dope in their arm. Ray Charles shooting dope in his arm. But he had a little bit about himself because his mother helped him to be driven, to be intentional. But some didn't have those supports. The things that we're doing is another form of support. We are that iron that sharpened iron to help them to see you have gifts and talents, but we need to help you to do it. The Bible tells about the three people. One was given 5, one given 10, and one given 1. Everybody that had more did more. The one that had the one buried his. When you bury your talent, that means you're not secure with yourself. Part of my PhD, the emphasis is emotional intelligence. One of the major pieces of that is self-awareness. We have to teach our young men, we have to teach everybody, daughters too, to be self-aware. A lot of the things you see outwardly that people deal with and handle, like you gave the case about the young girl, next thing you know, they get busy. They get ready to have a child, and here's the response of the young man. And sometimes the girls say the same thing. But again, you have to help them to know how to put those things in perspective. That comes down to being a person who could be a wise steward of thought. Then you brought up time. That's the other thing. I was telling this morning on one of my other programs, and I said, if you live to be 50 years old, you live 18,265 days. Now, that's a lot of time. Do you have, if you converted this to money, do you have anything that validate what you did with that time for 18,265 days? You have not. Everybody, most of the time, you worked in a factory, you've made over $1 million. But when you look in your house, do you have $1 million worth of something? See, we got to learn how to be wise steward of that which we're given. But before we can do that, we have to teach how to appreciate yourself from the inside out. That's what we teach at EMIY. That's what we teach in Good Following, how to value from the inside out. And it's a process. We have to teach how to embrace the process. And we have to teach how to be patient with the process. And once we do that, we're not radical. A lot of things we've spent our time was wasteful because we were people who didn't understand how to appreciate the process.
process and be patient for the process to work. A farmer understands when he does his crop, he plants his seed, he's patient enough to know there's going to be a harvest time. What do he do in between that time that don't waste time? He begins to start setting up everything so he can go ahead and sell the product once it's done, once it becomes to fruition. So it's so important for us to do what we're doing so we can ensure that these disorders, this disruption that happens when people are running their lives, think about it. I mean, when you meet people every day, you can see it when you go on the street, and it's just not in this culture. I bounced around from culture to culture, from state to state, to country to country, and it's all the same. You see, you still see somebody say, "Oh, I went to Arizona. I was in Arizona for intern residency." So I'm there, and they say, "Oh, I went to Arizona, and the homelessness was off the scale." I said, "Don't make no difference what state you go to. Homelessness is off the scale." What does that say? Somebody don't value himself. You're in America. They're coming to this country to reap the benefit. It may not be the best country in the world, but they understand the best opportunity in the world. They come to this country. How you in a land where everybody gets an opportunity, even if it ain't balanced out? But you get a land, you in a land of opportunity, and you don't take advantage of opportunity because you don't value yourself from the inside out. This is where the mindset of substantive culture has to be changed. To value yourself so that substantive culture comes, I accept me.
That's why parenting is so important.
Amen. Amen.
It is the beginning. It is the very actual beginning, as you just said, and Heather said, and we talk about. It is the actual beginning. It is what is bred in you. It's the seed we talked about. When we refer to our children as crack babies, what we fail to realize is, I've said this several times in the barbershop. Whatever you are on, your seed will be on. Mm-hmm. As you plant the seed, if the soil is healthy soil, the seed has a chance.
That's right.
If you plant the seed and the seed is not healthy soil, there's a good chance that you're going to produce a damaged seed. Mm-hmm. Does it mean that the seed doesn't have an opportunity to blossom? Mm-hmm. Right? Because we have all these things in place to break that seed, to make that seed become a full bloom. Mm-hmm. We don't throw away seeds. We build them, grow them, love on them. We put them in a different sun. We lay out, we watch them, we process them, we keep the weeds from around them. When it's a bad seed, that's what we must do. When it comes in and it's a good seed, and it's a good time, and I was married, you was married, we gave birth to the child comes in on a good seed. Also, depending on what I was on, the seed carrier, me, you, we're the ones that produces what the male seed will become. You see? So when we talk about these things, it gets right back to parenting, which is why family is so important. The culture is hard for the culture really to do that because it doesn't value family.
No.
And when you can't, so your investment, yesterday had this conversation, there's a book called Thou Shall Not Prosper. It's written by a rabbi. Very powerful book. Talks about family, talks about culture, talked about what is expected of the family and the culture, right? But what is the number one thing that goes into it? If they start a business, the first place they receive from is family, not us. See? Because we speak negatively about family. We create more damage within the family through words, through deeds, and actions. I borrowed $500 from you, Dave. Bump you. I borrowed $2,000 from you, Dave. You my cousin. You was supposed to get that, right? You don't have a format. You see, the structure of Thou Shalt Not Prosper laid out a format for which how family is able to help your business prosper. thou shalt not prosper when you do not have these structural things within the family. So when you have family all over the place, the seeds, the whole nine, it's very difficult to build wealth.
House divided can't stand.
House divided can't stand. So, to the solution. Solution 2, I want to go into solution 2, and my solution, right, falls upon, last week it was value the fathers. This week it's about valuing the children. Right? We have to, as a culture, value the children. It's so important that we value the children, because the children is what comes behind. So what I said here, regardless to what my children are doing, right? I am constantly reiterating to my children, right, the message of family gives. This is what we're about. When you talk about the man boys, we're constantly pushing that narrative. I'm constantly talking about your last name is Mann, and I'm constantly doing that. The thing that we have to do is value our children. You value your children, as I said last week, the male perspective, the father, right? We have to begin to uplift, but the children must be a witness to the value of that said perspective in person. The children must value, right? Because let's go back. We are a culture that talks about what God say. We'll throw up real quick in a conversation with you that honor that mother and father. We talking to our kids, right? But you be the main person that's not honoring your mother and your father. So you taught me not to honor you. So, okay, I deal with what you're talking about, but when I turn 18, you just on. You see? Because that is where it is missing. When we see these hate-filled rooms, when we see these hate-filled processes, it comes back to family. What are you teaching in your family, right? And so that's what this second solution is. We have to value our children. Please give 2 ways to value your children, starting with you, Heather.
2 ways to value your children. The first one, I believe, is to have a plan for them. And what I mean by that is you have to take those things that mean something to them into consideration, because that's the best way to dishonor or disrespect them, is to disregard their feelings about what is important to them instead of cultivating that. And I can tell you this, just as a mother, having to set boundaries for what my son is interested in or engaging in. I had to help him to set boundaries. Now he's interested in drawing. He's interested in games and being a judge and all of those kinds of things. He's interested in them, but it's for me to help cultivate those things in him. So I need to put him in environments where those things, we have access to those things in a different way than he is also processing it now. So if you're interested in law, so one of the things that I started to do was to help him make help to understand that it's just not what you see judges do on TV. It is, everything in law is based on the Constitution. So if you don't know that that's what attorneys are arguing back and forth and judges are arguing back and forth, the real question is, what is the law that you believe was broken? And what is that law based on? It's not just based on what we think or what we believe. It's actually a structure that has that in place. So I had to go back and reread the Constitution, understand the preamble of the Constitution, which is the reason that it was written. So for me to engage with him and his interest, that means I have to do more research. I need to know more than he does about the subject. And so that's how I shifted, so I can graft him into a realistic understanding of what that means to be a judge, or what that means to be an attorney, or what that means to be a reporter or talk show host, which is what his interests are. But I'm engaged in his interest. I'm not trying to supersede his interest. I'm trying to cultivate it and set parameters and standards for that engagement.
Dave, 2.
I think that the first thing is teaching your child about their value and helping to understand what self-awareness is all about. One of the things that we don't do, see, if you catch a child at 2 and 3 years old, and see, they learn, because if you want to know how to work a phone, just talk to a 2-year-old, and you'll find out they have the capacity to learn.
Yes.
So when you teach them how to value themselves, or have more self-awareness of who they are from the inside out, you begin to help them to deal with all the other factors that you guys just brought in. But the parent has to understand that value. And the second thing that you have to look at is teaching your child the importance of time. Time is essential because, again, time is the only commodity you can't get back. So if you waste the time, you can't recoup it. So you have to teach them in that process, understanding how to use your time. How do I validate this point? So there's a 13-year-old girl that just got accepted to medical school. Now, how did that young lady get into medical school, black, and teenager, I should say,
At 13?
At 13. Well, because she understood one thing, time management. But her mother taught her about time management because her mother valued her from the inside out. Because when she would go to the school, the kids would pick on her because of her gift. She was intellectually sound. So she took her out of the school, quality time, took her out of school, and then homeschooling, as you were doing with Raw. So in the process of that, they spend quality time together. Now they build a bond. Now they build an importance. Now the child gets to see the importance of my parent showing me I have value, and to show me what's inside of me so I can bring it out, and then teach me how to manage that time. So I still, because the young girl said, I still play with my friends. I still do all the things other kids do, but I understand how to manage my time. Once we get those two collaborated, now you as an individual like myself, not to say this in a boasting way, I understood how to navigate different things. As a kid, I didn't have one paper route. I had 3 paper routes. I didn't have one job. I had 2 jobs, and I still was a bad boy. You see what I'm saying? I ain't justifying that behavior, but that was the culture I grew up in, acceptable culture, right? But I understood I can hang out with my boys that's on the street, but I'm also hanging with those kids they called the nerds back then. I'm also hanging with these other cultures that had opportunity to know how to invest. So here's a kid goes out and buy a brand new car at 16. My parents couldn't buy it, I buy it. Here's a kid that's on his way to jail for 5 years, dropped $5,000 down in 1975. Time management, understand who I was. These are not things to boast about. These are lessons learned that I don't let allow become life curses. So teaching our kids self-value from the inside out, teach them how to use their time in line with what you guys just said, will allow this child to begin early on how to know that they are valued, let them know that we value them, and how to value themselves, and how to value everything outside in its proper perspective. See, we have a lot of resources. You know what I say today, we've seen our kids now, every generation, because they would complain about the kids. I said, but every generation wants their kids to have it better, right? But what didn't happen, we didn't open up the candy store and say, have at it. Well, too many choices without any kind of, if you will, appropriate education on how to deal with it. And when I say education, not just academic education, but how to make wise decisions, you get sick. This is what you see, a sick society, because the more choices you have without checks and balances, you're out of control.
You guys have said it. For me, and I'm gonna make it clear. Dallas is 6 months, pretty much. My daughter understands how I feel about reading. Taught her. She's an exceptional reader. She's already teaching him how to turn pages. He just started crawling. But as I explained to her, every opportunity I get, as I explained to her, this is the beginning of his greatness. We missed the boat. So my solution on valuing the children, as Heather said, as you said, take the time, as the 13-year-old girl, mother, take the time, structured time, not turn up time, not go to your room time, not get the PlayStation, go in your room, not the time, right, to teach them to read. Reading is life. It's on my flyer. It's our program. Reading is life, right? And I cannot wait till we can actually have that funded. Because we, just like we getting ready to do with this RV and pull up on these boys, I want a classroom full of boys teaching them how to read. You see, making sure, right? That's in our Boy Steps program. I want them, because I know when they come out of that room, being involved with what we do and teach, and pum, pum, pum. The number one thing, my second solution is raise adults. Start preparing your children as adults. Stop this child is my baby, and he gonna always be my baby. The Crystal sent me on Instagram. She sent me a picture where a mother was with her son, and her son was doing the Spider-Man hanging upside down, and his mom was kissing him. Literally. And because she knows I've been having this conversation 10, 12 years, she's seeing what I said, what God was revealing was going to be present within the culture. That is a prime example of why we have to teach our children, raise them as adults, and make sure that they learn to read from the word go. So for you parents out there, reading is life. We must understand that you are required, when you give life to a child, to teach that child how to read. One of the first things you need to be teaching that child, amongst all the other things that a child will be learning, crawling, all of that, because if you take that time, discipline them, read, they become readers. And the fact that they become readers mean they can become leaders.
Indeed.
Right? Because now I can read anything. And so I can see that and I can go there. And as you told your dad, I believe the world is bigger than this neighborhood. And the only thing that allowed you to go see and do all the things that you accomplished and all the things you accomplished and all the things I've accomplished was because I was able to read. That's right. If you cannot read, if your child cannot read, if you cannot read,
get
if your
resources.
Child can get resources, but teach your child how to read. That is way more valuable than any game or anything else that you have for them. Tell them where they can reach you at, Dave.
You can read me at Facebook at FMAM, and you can read me at drome7@yahoo.com. But I wanted to check something real fast. I know you've heard this, I don't like to read. And one of the things I often say that reading is about experiences. And when you begin to read, you take on adventures right in the reading concept. Right. It changes. The reason you can see a movie because somebody can read, because they wrote something. They wrote a script. So important for us to recognize reading is not a chore. It's an adventure. You just got to be willing to do your due diligence. Thanks.
Yes. So tell them where they can reach you at.
I just
You interrupted. You said you had one thing you wanted to say.
Oh, no, those are the two things. FMAM at Yahoo, Facebook, yeah, and then drome7 at yahoo.com.
Okay, awesome.
Heather Heteru. You can reach me at yourinspiredjourney.com, or you can reach me at 759-7855.
So, of course, EMIWorld.com. Encourage me. I'm young. Google it. Read it. EMIWorld.com. Facebook. Wherever you see the EMIY, we are present. But I want to close this, as I always have to. But I got to say this, and I think it's very, very important. We all grew up with this term. Reading is fundamental.
It's fundamental.
It is the very basis. Value your children with literacy. Value your children with time. But more than anything, give them structured time while teaching them something besides allowing them to watch foolishness, video games, and all of that. I'm not saying that I have all the answers. All I know is between what I do now and what I've been doing since I was 20, all my boys are husbands and fathers, and we haven't lost one. And I'm so very grateful that God gave me and chose me for this vision. And with that being said, remember, family is everything. Keep your family and put them first. My name is Calvin Mann, president and founder of EMI. God bless you and encourage me. I'm young. Peace.